Okay, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. You just joined SheCanCode's live webinar called You've Just Graduated, Now What? I am your host for today, Kelly Batesman, the Content Director at SheCanCode. For those tuning in who aren't familiar with us, SheCanCode is a global community with a mission to close the tech gender gap. We use content marketing and events to engage, inspire and attract more diverse communities to the tech sector. Before I introduce our fabulous speakers for today, please note that we have a live Q&A session running throughout, so please submit your questions and we will try and get to them at the end. So let's kick off with my two wonderful guests for today who are here to celebrate National Coding Week with me. Lily Madar, lead engineer at the Lego Group, and Madison Caccese, software developer, claim solutions at Verisk. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you both. We're going to kick off with a little bit about each of you, if that's okay. We'll just have a quick overview of both of you and your careers and how you got to this point to set the scene. So, Lily, should we start with you, if that's okay?
Yes. So I'm currently a lead engineer at the Lego Group. I've been in tech for quite a while now. I graduated my bachelor's in 2011, so quite a while ago. I started building advertising banners in the advertising industry, the digital ones that are currently blocked by every possible browser, and they don't annoy you too much anymore, but that's where I started. And after that, I moved to an interaction design studio where we were doing a mix of digital installations and website. And a few years later, I moved to the Financial Times, where I was looking at the new possibilities in their R&D department, and finally landed at the Lego Group a year and a half ago.
Amazing. And so it doesn't sound like you took a traditional route into tech. What did you study at university?
A very obscure degree called Hypermedia and Communications.
Okay.
a mix of introduction to tech, but also design, art, kind of more traditional communication and psychology background. So yes, not if you ask me about big O notation and all these very techy things, I will not be able to respond without looking it up. But I find that I didn't need that in my career.
Yeah, which is good to hear, and something that we love to hear on these live webinars, and also on our podcast, where we have regular discussions about how our ladies get into tech. And it's never the traditional tech route. There are people that do it, but it's always lovely to hear that people take so many routes in, and you're another example of that. Madison, yourself, welcome to the panel. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into tech? What is your career journey so far?
Definitely. So I graduated from college in 2022, so quite recently. And so I was a computer science major and data science minor there. And so I actually interned at the company that I'm working at now. I interned here back in my sophomore year as a marketing intern because I was very interested in that. And then the next summer, my junior year, I interned at Verisk again as a software engineer because I kind of just knew I wanted to go more of the tech route. And then after that, after doing a few interviews at Verisk and stuff, I was offered the role of software developer, and I've now been at Verisk for a little over a year now.
Lovely. And it's nice that you have a different route in as well. So Lily, you took the traditional computer science route in. You said that you kind of knew what you wanted to do in tech. Had somebody encouraged you into that career route? Was that school or parents?
Nobody in general encouraged me. Back in high school, actually, like I found out I could take AP computer science, and that I just kind of fell in love with that and went from there.
Yeah, it's nice when you hear two completely different stories, that some ladies fall into tech and that you definitely took you knew what you wanted to do and took that route. We'd love to kick off this conversation today we're going to be talking a little bit about you've graduated, now what do you do? And there'll be lots of listeners who are just reaching that part of their first stages of their career and wondering what they're going to do next. And you ladies are going to share your experiences on that. I'd love to kick off with a little bit about securing your first roles, and what was your experience of that, and you know, when you applied, but how did all that kind of come about? And Maddie, you mentioned that you're on an internship. Can you walk us through a little bit about that? You know, how did you hear about the internship? What was the application process like for you? Why did you choose an internship is a good question.
Yeah, sure. So I basically just heard about the internship just through a few people that I knew. I knew some people working at Verisk, and so I knew the company culture was just great. So basically, the applying wasn't too hard. You basically just do like a small technical exam, and like do just some normal interviews. Yeah.
So it was a pretty straightforward process, and I take it you don't have any regrets about taking an internship. It sounds like it's been an incredibly positive experience for you, and it's not something that you look back and think, oh, you know, I wish I hadn't have done that.
No, yeah, I mean, at that point I was still in college, so I definitely wanted some work experience before actually going out into the corporate world and like securing my first job.
Yeah, and I've heard that often about internships. They're incredibly valuable, and a really good route to get into the industry before you land your first job. Lily, what about yourself? When you graduated, what was your first job like? What was it like to get into the industry and, you know, apply for your first job? Did you find that difficult at all, not having work experience, or did you take work experience before you landed your first role?
So I've got similar progress to Madison in that respect, that I started with an internship and got hired after my 2-month internship in my first company. But I found it really hard to land the internship in the first place. So I was sending dozens and dozens of emails to, usually it's the random contact number you don't really know who to call. I don't think LinkedIn was that big back in the day either, or any of the recruitment boards that you can find today. So I had a lot of unanswered emails, but a few companies responded and ended up doing 2 months internship with them before they offered me my first junior position.
Amazing. And yeah, another great route to get that work experience before you landed your first full-time role. And you said you struggled applying for your internship. Did you get any help from university before you went out into the world of work to try and apply for roles, or was it just kind of you just tried to apply anywhere you could?
Ironically, the securing an internship was part of my degree, so I was getting some credits for having the internship, but then there wasn't that much support from the university to find. So it was, you know, do a Google lookup of what field you might want to work into, and then email whoever you can find on those websites.
Yeah, and I've heard that often as well, that, you know, universities say, for instance, that internships are a really good path to take, but you're kind of left on your own a little bit to try and secure one, let alone, you know, help with your application, and how to actually land one is not always there. Madison, did you have a similar experience, or, you know, was your college very helpful in helping you find your internship, or was it something you had to do on your own?
I would say they didn't help me exactly find my internship, but they did help me with like practicing for interviews and fixing my resume, because we have like a whole career center at Gettysburg College. That's where I went. And that was really helpful.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. At least somebody, I don't think you realize the mistakes on your CV until you start sending them out, especially when you just graduated. You send out hundreds of applications, and then, you know, a lot of them you haven't tailored, or your CV is not up to scratch, and you don't realize actually you probably missed a lot of opportunities there. You just needed some honest feedback about that CV. So that's good, at least, that your university stepped in. I don't think a lot of universities help with that, or they might have an extra service that might be able to help. I haven't heard of it yet. Can I ask you a little bit? So obviously you both took internships, which is fabulous. So obviously you got that work experience. Did either of you do any extra work experience in terms of, did you do volunteering to try and get some experience, or did you work with any charities or organizations that kind of helped you to kind of work on your personal brand before you started to apply for roles? Have you done anything, both of you, outside of work and work experience at that point? Lily, yourself, did you work with any other groups?
So volunteering, no. I had internships the first couple of years before that last one when I graduated, and also I had a lot of university projects in my portfolio in terms of tech and animations and things like that I could show off as well, but not volunteering as such.
Yeah, it's good to hear that you had lots of projects. On these live webinars, we get asked a lot of questions from our listeners about how do you apply for a role if you haven't got any experience yet. And a lot of our panelists tend to say a really good way of doing that is working on different projects to show your skills, find some work experience, which isn't always the easiest, especially short-term work experience isn't always the easiest to find unless you sign up for an internship, obviously. So that can be quite difficult to add any work experience to your CV to show that you have the necessary skills for your first job. And Madison, did you do anything in terms of project work or volunteering, anything extra that you took part in at university?
I didn't do any like volunteering per se, but so I also had a lot of like projects that I worked on during college, but I also was a TA during college, so I assisted some of the professors during classes and stuff, and like held office hours after like once a week or something. And then I also was a part of like a bunch of clubs, in particular ACM club, which was basically I just called it computer science club. And we did a lot of projects, held like hackathons, and I think that provided me like with some leadership and just also exposing me to other things.
Yes, because I wanted to ask you then, how did that help you? Because obviously when you reach the world of work, or even just before when you're applying for your internship, did you find that doing all of those extra things kind of helped you to stand out amongst other candidates?
I would say yes, just because I could say like I had a leadership role like in my sorority, I had a leadership role in this club and that club, and I kind of took different leadership roles within each so I could highlight like different skills that I did throughout college. And I think that kind of definitely helped me to stand out.
Yes, definitely. So one of the biggest things after you graduated is obviously you have to start interviewing with companies that you can be incredibly nervous. I personally think it takes a lot of practice before you can really nail an interview. And looking back, it's almost like you want to write the first few off entirely because it takes practice to interview well. Did you have a few interviews before securing your first role or your first internship? Because it does take practice, doesn't it? So what were your experiences in terms of interviewing and securing your first role? Lily, should we go to you?
Yes. So for my first role, actually, it was purely based on emails. I emailed all these companies, and then they hired me for the internship, and then the hiring process was a chat with my line manager for a few minutes, and that was it. But when I moved through various jobs, I did find that practice is important. And so you want to select some companies that are maybe not your first choice, but going to an interview with them is going to be building your experience in interviewing, and maybe highlight some questions that you weren't expecting that you'll know to answer in the next interview. When I interviewed to work at the Lego group, I also practiced with a friend who's in the industry with me. I knew roughly the format of the interview and things like, because I hadn't, my I was in my previous job for 5 years, so I hadn't been on the interviewing scene for quite a while, and all the rules and the codes sometimes change. So I think finding a buddy to try and practice as well is a good thing to do.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think some people might find that quite uncomfortable, but actually, somebody that is going to give you honest feedback as well into even how you come across in an interview. I remember being this was once I'd secured the job, but we spent some time on a project where we would film when we were interviewing each other, just to be able to see our body language and how we come across, to really help with when you go for your next one, because there are certain things you just don't realize that you're doing. I was fidgeting a lot, and I love the fact as well that you said it's just good experience just to go to interviews. I think graduates in particular, I remember having that feeling of putting a lot of pressure on yourself that you have to go for that interview and you have to secure that role. And actually looking back, I wish somebody had just said to me, it's okay, take the pressure off yourself and just use those experiences as a learning curve, and also to see whether or not that is a company that you would like to work for as well. If you go to that interview and you step through the door and you think, actually, this isn't for me, and I didn't like the environment or the culture, then you don't have to grab it as well. It's very different when you have just graduated and you're applying everywhere and you think, just take me on any team. But sometimes just to take a moment and to really pick a good company can make such a difference for your next career route. And Madison, what about yourself? What was your experience of interviewing for your internship? And did you have a little practice before then?
Yeah, I would say I definitely just did a lot of practice interviews with my friends and my family. And I also, my interviews that I've had, they've all been online because I didn't start doing interviews until like 2020, 2021 or something. Yeah, 2020. And COVID had just hit. So all of my interviews have been like basically through like a video Zoom Teams format. Yeah.
How did you find that? Where it was that different for you? So were you still getting a good idea of the company's culture and through Zoom?
So if I would say yes, I still was able to get like an idea of the company's culture through Zoom just because of the questions that I asked.
Yeah.
But I would say it's easier to get an idea of the culture through in person, probably. I just haven't had that experience. So
Yeah, it's nice that you'll have the option for that next time as well. Fingers crossed. But yes, I agree. Interviewing on Zoom can be incredibly different to meeting somebody in person, and to really get a feel of even going to a company's offices and seeing what it's like. And if you have to work there day to day, you get to see that obviously in the interview process. I wanted to ask you both a little bit about what it was like searching for roles. On a few of our live webinars, we have a lot of questions from first and second jobbers, or first jobbers, who said that they've really struggled looking for certain open positions that are just fresh out of uni, if you don't have any work experience. Whereas a lot of companies, they tend to always post a job and it says 2 years minimum experience. There are not many jobs that are just open for somebody fresh out of university. Is that both of your experiences when looking? I know you both ended up in internships, but when you were looking for roles, was that the kind of thing that you saw, that experience was needed? Maddie, should we start with you?
yeah, I would definitely say like a lot of the roles I was looking at like had 2+ years experience. But sometimes it says 2+ years experience preferred. So then you can still apply for that, and you'll potentially get an interview for that. So I would say it made applying to it more daunting, but you're still able to apply to that, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's lovely to hear that you still felt you could apply. That is something I have heard often as well from ladies. So ladies won't always apply if they don't meet all of the job spec, whereas men tend to just go ahead anyway. The same with work experience. If you think you tick most of those boxes, then why not apply anyway and see? And if you're right, if it did say 2 years preferred, then they might still pick your application to go through for at least a first screening of you anyway. So you're absolutely right. It's great advice that if you do see something, then just go ahead and apply anyway and see. Lily, what was your experience when applying? Did you notice that were you a bit disheartened seeing jobs that were kind of 2 years plus, and you're not quite there yet?
It used to be like that when I first started in my career. I think companies are getting better now at writing better job specs. It's not, you need 2 years in this, 3 years in that. It's more, here's our tech stack. This is what you expect it to work with. I think it's a good filter as well for you as a candidate to say, well, does this company know what they're talking about? Because they're listing 5 years plus experience in that technology that's only been around for 2, or that kind of thing as well. But it's definitely worth applying, I think, when you still have this time frame stated on the advert. Because in the end, it's all about demonstrating that you're capable of learning on the job. And if you have a little bit of experience, it's fine. I find I work mostly on the web, so I know, if it's a JavaScript framework over another, I know I can transfer the skills from the one I have to the other one as well. So it's demonstrating that you're capable, and it comes down to the interview as well. I know some companies will reject you based on the CV because it doesn't say the word on your CV, but that also maybe should be a filter for you to say, oh, well, they didn't want me, fine. I'll focus on someone else.
Yes, I agree, and that's absolutely fine. And again, was a learning curve for your next application or wherever it may take you. I wanted to move on a little bit to talk about your current companies, and how do your companies support you in your career development now that you've got your foot through the door? Lily, what happens at Lego?
So we have quite a few things. We've got a career framework for engineers. We have a mentorship program as well within my department. There is, for women as well, we have a group of women in tech internally. There's various different things. I think we also support changing careers. There's various programs, so there is support and periodic checks with your line manager and things like that.
So you haven't just got your foot in the door and have been left and that's it. You definitely have check-ins, and I suppose to help you work towards your next role as well, to hope that that is still within Lego, because I know sometimes that feeling of you got your foot through the door, but you're kind of forgotten about a little bit, or maybe nobody checks in about where you would like to go next in your career. And it's great that you got in and you're doing, the day-to-day. But obviously in the back of your mind, you're always going to be thinking, but what is my next step? And how can I ensure that next step is at Lego? And what will that look like? Really good companies obviously take notice of that and try and retain good talent. Maddie, yourself, what happens at Verisk? Do you feel supported in your internship, and what's happening in terms of your career development?
Yeah, so I definitely felt supported in my internship, and especially in my role that I have now. But basically my company, they offer like learning courses like through LinkedIn Learning or a bunch of others. And then because I was a previous intern before I secured this full-time role, I was part of this cohort called Early Career Foundations, and that was for about the first year. And that kind of helped to get me familiar with the corporate world. And then also we have employee networks like the Women's Network. And I also started up the Women in Tech group here at Verisk so that we can meet other women interested in tech. And Verisk also supports the internal movement like Lily was talking about. And then I also have monthly meetings with my manager to discuss my career and where I want to go. We have like a career toolkit that we can use to kind of help us flesh out our ideas of where we want to go within the next 5 years, 10 years, and things like
Oh, amazing. Yes, just as I had previously mentioned, good talent, good companies know good talent and attempt to retain them
that.
for the next 5 to 10 years, because you are in your internship. Obviously, you know, your company are going to be thinking, how do we hold on to Maddie and ensure that she stays with us for the next 5 years minimum. It's lovely that you mentioned that you started the Women in Tech group and that your company allowed you to do that. How did that happen? Did you just approach them and say, hey, I think you need this? And were they quite open to that?
Well, basically, so I was talking to my mentor and she was like, "Oh, like you should join a women in tech group." And then she looked and there was none. So she said, "Would you like to start one?" And I was like, "Yes, of course I'd like to start one so I can meet more people who are interested in the things that I'm interested in and also learn more about the company that I'm a part of, and kind of see like the software development that I do over on the claims side compared to the software development that people do over on the underwriting side and kind of
Yeah.
be able to see how everything connects within the company that I intend to be a part of for the next however many years."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really good to hear. It's always good to hear when a company allows you to expand as well and to be able to do that. And obviously it works in their favor as well for others to connect within the business from different sides of things. So and great work, again, great work experience to add to your CV for future roles as well. I wanted to ask you both a little bit about whether or not you've heard from others that were on your courses at university, and whether or not they are struggling to find work in the tech sector, or have they been snapped up? I remember when I went back for graduation many moons ago, a lot of people from my course were really struggling, and I remember I was very lucky that I was in full-time work and I was going to an evening event after graduation. But for a lot of people, they hadn't found roles or roles that were relevant to their degrees, which is something that we hear so often, that people leave university and then really struggle, even if they got really good, you know, computer science degrees, technical degrees, whatever it may be. I'd love to hear, have you heard anything like that? What are people from your uni days kind of doing with themselves now? Lily, should we start with you?
Well, mine is quite a while back. I think because my degree was not very tech focused, it's a bit harder. It's not really a good benchmark for this type of question. I know some of them have found work in the tech industry. Others are. One of my good friends from university has just changed careers and is doing a gardening or fruit harvesting course at the moment, and
See,
branching out.
yeah, it's that kind of thing. You hear stories like that all the time. You do wonder where people have gone. Did you hear of anybody that did go off and do kind of what they intended to do?
I think a few people are still in their designer, web designer kind of path and journey. Yes, from the one I still hear from.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's good to hear. Maddie, yourself, what about anybody from your college? Have you stayed in touch with them, and have they really struggled, or have they been snapped up by tech companies?
Yeah, so I knew like a few women who graduated from Gettysburg College recently, and they actually were able to secure their roles before they had even graduated their senior year, because of doing a previous internship with a company that they liked, or just doing a lot of interviews with a bunch of companies and starting very early, like in November of their senior year or something, or October even. So they had started that super early, and some of them have gone off. One of them actually, I'm very happy for her. She's gone off to Google. So she went to live in California, which is very different from Gettysburg College, which is in Pennsylvania.
Amazing. Yeah, it's good to hear that lots of people from those courses were snapped up, and that people secured them as well before they already graduated. And I think as well, it's okay if that doesn't happen. I had a guest on our podcast who said something similar to me, And she said, I felt like everybody else on my university course had been, handed a job before they'd already graduated. And she said, and I had a good degree, but I hadn't been offered an opportunity yet. And it wasn't until a few months after I graduated that she then secured a job at a really good company. But she said, I wish I'd just been a little easier on myself and thought, I don't have to feel that I'm a failure because I haven't secured anything yet. You graduate and you go off into the world and you look for opportunities, and the one that is best for you. But it is hard, isn't it, sometimes, that if students on your course are securing really good jobs before they've already graduated, and you might be thinking, why isn't anyone snapping me up?
Yeah, I'll definitely add to that. Like, I only knew like 5 women in computer science. So I'm talking about 5 people out of like a bunch of people who are in computer science. And even outside of computer science, like a lot of my friends didn't secure jobs until a few months, maybe like 5 or 6 months after they graduated. And I think that's totally fine. It gives you time to really think about what exactly do you look for in a company and what kind of job do you really want to pursue.
Yes, definitely. And I think I had a lot of uni friends who came out the other side of their degree and actually decided that that degree and what they'd studied, it just wasn't for them, and they didn't want to go into that area anyway. So sometimes that happens as well, that you spend that time studying and you go off and you want to do something different anyway, and sometimes it just takes graduating and searching for jobs for that to all fall into place as well. So for anybody listening that is thinking, why haven't I been offered an opportunity yet, that is quite normal, and I'm sure you will find a really good role very soon, but you're not the only one. We are speeding towards live Q&A time in a second, and I just wanted to ask you, both of you, is there anything that you wish that you had been told before you entered the world of work? Anything that you would like to share with our listeners? Maddie, yourself.
Yes, definitely. So the transitioning from college to work is very interesting. I would say the corporate world is very different from what you learn in college. Like in college, I didn't learn like, oh, you code the front end and you code the back end. No, it was kind of just like all in one thing. So I would just say it's very different in the corporate world, and that's totally fine. Just give yourself time to get used to the new experience, and like everything will be just fine.
Amazing, brilliant advice there. Thank you, Maddie. Yes, I think we all have thoughts in our mind that we wish we'd told ourselves several years ago. Lily, yourself, is there anything that you wish you'd been told before you entered the world of work?
Quite a few things, I think, but the one I can think of is sometimes it's fine to walk away. Sometimes you'll come at a point where something that seemed like a good fit for you is not that anymore, and it's also fine to look for something else when the time's over, not try to keep making it work, as it were, because then you'll end up miserable. It's not good.
Yeah, that's good advice, and especially when you're a graduate, because I think it's just taking a moment to think, what, actually, I'm not desperate. And it's kind of that desperation of applying for everything and hoping you just get on a team. But you are right, sometimes just walking away can really help you as well. We have some questions in the live Q&A that we can chat over for a couple of minutes because it is flying by already. But I have somebody in here, they said, I'm a recent grad. How many internships do you think is good to have? Should I try and get 2 or 3 short internships to boost my CV? Lily, you said that you did a couple of internships. Would you advise that, or is it better to take the one and get more experience in that area?
I think it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality and what you can demonstrate you've done during that internship that will then contribute to your future role somewhere else. So if you find somewhere and you really like it and you're doing good work, then fine. If it's a short thing to add to your CV list, it might not be the best.
Yes, and you mentioned as well that good advice of, if it's just not working for you, then move on, which is brilliant advice. And you are right. If you're not getting much out of your internship, then find a route out. Maddie, you're within a good internship. Would you advise that, you finding a good company and signing up and getting that really good experience instead of moving around?
I mean, that's what I've preferred. I did prefer to have um both of my internships at this company before I secured the full-time role, but um I think that's just because I really liked where I was at. If I hadn't enjoyed the company culture as much as I enjoyed it, I definitely would have gone and searched for an internship in a different company. But like Lily said, it's definitely about the experience that you have here and making the most of it.
Yes, definitely, and grabbing hold of the really good opportunities and thinking hopefully they give me a full-time role, because I really like it here and I want to stay. I can see somebody in here, they've said, I've just graduated and looking for my first tech role. Do you have any advice for balancing the need for a job with finding a great company to work for? We spoke a little bit about that throughout this, about finding the right role for you, being okay with taking that time to find a good role. Do either of you have any advice for balancing that need for a job because you've just graduated and just waiting around to find the right company?
Yeah, I can take this. I think it's fine to interview multiple. You should interview multiple places because you're not guaranteed to get the interview you've applied for. I think it's worth bearing in mind that wherever you land in your first job, you're probably not going to stay at that company for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, there are exceptions, but people tend to move around every 3-5 years anyway. So it's you could apply to the great company you want to work for, and you might not get hired this time, but maybe in the next 5 years when you've got a bit of experience under your belt, then you could reapply again to a similar role. So don't discard potential employers on the first job because you think, oh, it's not the company I want to work for. Again, give it a go. If it looks like it's a good fit, then give it a few years and then reevaluate as you grow in your role.
Yes, I agree. And sometimes it's not always, you think that a good company is a good name, but actually when you start looking and you might find a really good startup that you'd never even heard of, for example, and then you find another opportunity that you didn't even know was possible because you were looking at the big names and big companies. And as you said, you might apply for those roles and not get them at this moment. But I would say, don't discard other opportunities. For instance, startups, you would get lots of experience and very, very fast. And then in the future, then think about going back to those big companies again that you wanted to work for previously. I completely agree with you there, Lily. Madison, yourself, do you think it's worth holding out for that good company and that good jobs? It is hard when you are looking for a job and you're thinking, or should I just take anything?
I would say don't just take anything. Make sure that you enjoy the culture there is what I think the main thing is. Like you said, like you might really find a startup that you really like, and the environment of a startup is very different than the environment of a big company. So you need to figure out which kind of environment you really want to be in. And just remember that it's your first job and you don't have to stay there if you don't want to. If you start at a startup and you don't like the environment of a startup, then try applying for a big company after a year, 2 years, 3 years or something when you have more work experience and are more likely to get accepted.
Yes, definitely. I completely agree. I have a lady in here who's asking, what are the chances of getting hired for a first tech role in the current market? Which is such an interesting question because I keep seeing conflicting news stories at the minute that are saying the tech sector is booming or hiring is down. What do you both think at the minute? Is there anything that you're seeing? Do you think it is a good time to come in and find a first tech role, or not? Or we're not quite back there? Or perhaps you would both advise it's just a really good time to go out and try and find an internship? Would you agree?
I must admit I haven't quite looked at the market that recently, so I don't know. I know I'm on the hiring panel here as well. but so companies will have some maybe apprenticeships as well as internships and things like that. So it's a good thing to look into as well, if you're looking to get upskilled in a particular area.
Yes, definitely. That is good advice. I've got somebody else in here. They've asked, I've got my first technical interview next week. Do you have any advice? Madison, did you go through a technical interview? Lily, I know you weren't technical when you came in, and your role isn't, but Maddie, did you go through a technical interview?
So I did a technical interview for a separate company that I had applied for. My advice is just definitely study the basics like that you've learned, because you just need to really be able to explain your reasoning on how you're getting from point A to point B within the technical interview. Explain like, oh, if they're asking like, how can we save the data in something, like make sure you say like a database, or like come up with something like, I would say just definitely study the basics, because so I just did when I applied to that other company, I didn't study it at all, and I kind of, that was not a good idea. You need to just familiarize yourself, because I mean the basics I learned like 3, 4, 5 years ago, like, so touch up on those.
Yes, great advice. Prepare. I think people are incredibly unnerved by technical interviews, and they're not always sure where to get started. So prepare would be brilliant advice. We're almost out of time. There are lots of questions coming in. Any that we can't get to, we will follow up on SheCanCode tomorrow with some more answers. But I have got one in here that we might be able to address very quickly in the next minute. Somebody has said it's not talked about enough, but if you don't mind sharing your experiences, if you know, but are internships paid, unpaid, negotiable? What have your experiences been so far with internships, and can you negotiate on pay?
I think you can these days. My one when I graduated was unpaid, but they were covering transport and a bit of money for lunch. In my case, there was more, I needed to land an internship to get the credits for my degree, so I would have taken anything else. But if you can negotiate, I mean, some companies will be open to negotiating, then definitely negotiate for a base salary.
Yeah, definitely. And Maddie, when you were looking, did you find there were a mix of paid and unpaid when you were looking for internships?
So definitely there are a mix of paid and unpaid. When I did my 2 internships, they were both paid here at Verisk, but that's not why I took them. I took them because I really liked the company, but I didn't negotiate on the pay just because I was happy to get an internship at a company where I liked the culture, but I would say you probably can negotiate. Yeah.
And you're right. If you find a good company and you're getting really good work experience, and that's what you wanted, then I think it comes down to the individual and the company and how you feel about what they're offering you. But if you feel like they're offering you something fantastic anyway by letting you work at their company, then yeah, that's a decision that every individual needs to make. Ladies, we're already out of time. There are so many live questions coming in, so thank you so much to all of our listeners. We're going to follow up with some of these tomorrow on SheCanCode.io, and we will also follow up with the recording of this so you can watch it again, and we will share it out to the wider community tomorrow as well. But thank you both so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, Maddie and Lily. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights. So thank you very much. And to all of our listeners, as always, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. We will see you again next month for a discussion about empathy in tech and empathy in business. As I mentioned, we will share this recording with you all tomorrow as well. So thank you to everybody, and we will see you next time.